Hello, class. My name is Connor Markgraf, and I'm here to present on the DC plane crash that occurred earlier this year. Some background information about this incident. On January 29th, American Airlines flight number 5342 collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter near Reagan Airport in Washington, D.C. The plane was attempting to land. Meanwhile, the Black Hawk helicopter was in the middle of a training run. The next slide shows video footage of the crash occurring.
In the first video, the Black Hawk can be seen flying at speed over the Potomac from the left side of the screen. The American Airlines plane can be seen flying towards the airport before the two collide, causing a mid-air explosion and fall into the river. In the second video, you can see the Army helicopter and American Airlines plane travel toward each other.
Here's an overall timeline of events for how the plane and helicopter eventually found themselves on a crash course together. The crash resulted in the deaths of 67 people, 60 passengers, 4 flight crew, and all 3 aboard the helicopter. It's the deadliest plane crash in the United States since 2001, where 260 people perished. As a result of the crash, Reagan Airport was immediately closed for the next 14 hours. The Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, implemented a temporary ban on all non-emergency helicopters from flying near Reagan Airport. This ban is still in effect today, and the FAA is also exploring making this ban permanent. The crash also has resulted in a decrease in public faith in the safety of air travel, according to a survey that was taken after the DC plane crash and also after the deadly crash of a medical ambulance helicopter in Philadelphia that killed 7. The percentage of people who feel plane travel is safe dropped 7% from the year prior. There was also an 8% increase in the percentage of people who feel plane travel is unsafe. It's also discouraging to see that only half of all survey respondents have confidence in the government's ability to maintain air safety. Unfortunately, this is not the first time that a Black Hawk helicopter has crashed. In fact, since 2014, there have been 12 crashes that have killed 47 military service members. In 2024 alone, there were 12 helicopter crashes that resulted in 14 deaths. It should be noted that not all of those crashes involved the Black Hawk helicopter. Nonetheless, a common finding for these crashes was spatial disorientation, which refers to a pilot's inability to accurately perceive their aircraft's position, altitude, or motion relative to the ground. Here are some of the most recent crashes of Black Hawk helicopters. As you can see, most occurred during training or testing operations. You may be wondering why the Army conducts helicopter training near the busy DC airspace. The unit flying the helicopter in the crash was from the 12th Aviation Battalion. They're responsible for ferrying cabinet officials, lawmakers, and other VIPs. They also carry out continuity of government missions, where in a national emergency they would be expected to fly government officials to secure locations. Therefore, pilots have to train where they'll be called on to fly. Some important things to note about Reagan Airport is that it has the busiest runway in the United States, averaging 819 takeoffs per day. It's located near 2 other major airports and various military bases. Reagan Airport also has to contend with Helicopter Alley, where all sorts of police, military, news, and rescue helicopters are flying in the same airspace as commercial planes. Lastly, its main runway is almost half the length of a standard runway, which further complicates matters. These next several slides are going to look at the system failures that resulted in this crash happening, and potential solutions that could have prevented it from happening. Since this is an ongoing investigation, there's only one known system failure at this time. The one known system failure at this time is that the Black Hawk pilots were flying above 200 feet. DC airspace restricts helicopters to below 200 feet. The crash occurred at around 325 feet. Recorded conversations from the helicopter indicated the 2 pilots giving conflicting altitude data, with one saying 300 feet and the other saying 400 feet. One might assume that the pilots must have been inexperienced for them to be flying above the 200-foot rule, but that is simply not the case. Chief Warrant Officer Andrew Eves had over 1,000 hours of flight time on the Black Hawk helicopter, while Captain Rebecca Loback had over 500 hours of flight time. This was not their first rodeo mission. The rest of these system failures are potential contributors. As said earlier, this is an active and ongoing investigation. Final causes are still being determined. According to a preliminary FAA report, there was one air traffic controller handling both helicopter traffic and plane landings. The report also indicated that staffing was not normal for the time of day and volume of traffic. The job of an air traffic controller is a very important one, as they're responsible for monitoring and directing the movement of aircraft on the ground and in the air. They manage the flow of aircraft into and out of airport airspace and issue instructions to pilots, among several other key responsibilities. The obvious solution is to have at least two separate air traffic controllers in the tower, one whose sole job is to monitor and communicate with helicopter traffic, while the other's job is to monitor and communicate with plane traffic. This solution is easier said than done, however. There's a nationwide shortage of air traffic controllers across the country. A staffing report from September of 2023 indicated that Reagan Airport only had 19 fully certified air traffic controllers. The FAA and the union representing air traffic controllers has a target of 30. Another potential contributor is the concept of light pollution, which can distort your surroundings. Reagan Airport is relatively small and experiences lots of light pollution from the surrounding metro area. Additionally, since it's located on the Potomac River, the water can present visual illusions. A potential solution to combat light pollution is to conduct the helicopter trainings at either Dulles International Airport or Baltimore-Washington International Airport. Both are located in Washington, D.C. and do not experience the same levels of light pollution that Reagan Airport does. They also have less busier runways. The FAA report also indicated that the Black Hawk helicopter pilots were wearing night vision goggles during the time of the crash. The light pollution discussed a few slides earlier could have temporarily blinded the pilots. Since Black Hawk helicopters require two pilots to fly them, a solution moving forward would be to have only one pilot wear the goggles. Another potential system failure is the helicopter altimeter or altimeters. The altimeter tells pilots how far above land and sea level they are. A Black Hawk has two altimeters, one that relies on barometric pressure and one on radio frequency signals. As established earlier, the pilots were flying above the 200-foot rule. The two pilots gave conflicting altitude readings. This could be indicative of one or both altimeters malfunctioning. The last potential system contributor to the accident is the complex design of the human-machine interface for the Black Hawk helicopter. It requires two pilots to fly the helicopter and requires the multitasking listed on screen. It becomes even more complicated to fly at night, especially if wearing night vision goggles. Unfortunately, there isn't a good way to simplify this complex set of machinery, at least none that I can identify. But it's important to at least identify it as another way that a military helicopter could have crashed into a commercial airliner. These are the lists of references I used for this presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to answer them. Thank you very much for your time today.